The call bursts through the quiet hum of an ordinary afternoon. A woman's voice, shaking but fierce, gasps words that freeze the operator on the other end. "I'm Amanda Berry. I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm free." For a moment, silence hangs in the air, the kind that feels too heavy to be real. The line between nightmare and reality blurs, and the world outside that small Cleveland house has no idea what's about to unfold. Behind that trembling voice is a decade of stolen years, a home turned into a prison, and a secret so monstrous it lived in plain sight. Imagine it, a quiet street, kids playing, neighbors mowing lawns. No one suspects that behind one of those walls, 3 young women are counting time by seasons slipping through a boarded window. But today, one of them breaks through. A locked door gives way. A scream reaches the street. A stranger runs to help, and the unthinkable truth begins to surface. 10 years of silence shatters in a single minute. Amanda Berry is alive. And as the police race toward the address she gives, a question echoes louder than the sirens. How could this happen here, in a neighborhood full of eyes, and no one sees a thing? The story of what happened inside that house and how Amanda found her way out begins here. Before her name became a headline, Amanda Berry was just a 16-year-old girl from Cleveland, ordinary in the best kind of way. She wasn't the type who wanted to be noticed by everyone, but those who knew her couldn't forget her energy. She had this half-shy smile that always seemed to show up before her laughter did, the kind of smile that made people feel comfortable, like they'd known her longer than they had. Amanda lived with her mother, and theirs was a small, close-knit world, built on late-night talks, music drifting through the walls, and plans for the kind of future that only teenagers dream about. She had a job at Burger King, and though it wasn't glamorous, she took pride in it. Every paycheck meant a step closer to independence. Maybe a car, maybe a phone she didn't have to share, maybe a little piece of freedom. Her friends remember her love for simple things. Walking to school with her headphones in, always listening to the same few songs on repeat. One of them, a soft pop tune that was everywhere in the early 2000s, felt like her anthem. That song, that moment, that smile, those were the details of a girl who believed life was just beginning to open up for her. There was a certain lightness about Amanda, but underneath it, a maturity most 16-year-olds didn't have. She'd seen her share of hard days, but she never let it show for long. She was protective of her family, especially her mom, and dreamed about traveling one day, just to see what existed beyond the streets she'd always known. She wanted more, but not out of restlessness, out of hope. On that last ordinary day, no one around her knew they were seeing her for the last time as she was, carefree, full of plans, humming her favorite song on her way out the door. The air was warm, the city felt safe, and her life seemed steady enough to trust. But that's the cruel thing about stories like Amanda's. The world keeps spinning, the music keeps playing, and in one heartbeat, everything ordinary turns into a memory. And that was the last glimpse of Amanda Berry before the light around her life went dark. It was Monday, April 21st, 2003. The kind of spring day that felt ordinary. Sky clear, streets busy, Cleveland quietly going about its rhythm. Amanda Berry had just finished her shift at Burger King. It was the day before her 17th birthday. She was planning to celebrate, had already picked out the clothes she'd wear, and told her sister she'd be home soon. But those words, soon, would never come. At around 7:30 that evening, Amanda clocked out. The walk home was less than a mile, barely a 10-minute stretch through familiar streets she'd traveled hundreds of times before. She started down Lorraine Avenue, her uniform still on, her small black bag slung over her shoulder. Traffic hummed, streetlights flickered on one by one. People remember seeing her, Some say near a gas station, others closer to her house. Small, ordinary moments that would later become haunting fragments of a timeline. Somewhere between Burger King and her front door, Amanda vanished. Just disappeared. No scream, no sign of a struggle anyone could recall. One minute she was a teenage girl heading home, and the next she was gone without a trace. Her last known phone call came shortly after she left work. She called her sister to say she'd found a ride home. That small detail would later become the pivot point of everything, because whoever offered that ride would lead Amanda into 10 years of silence. That short stretch of road, the one she'd walked 100 times, became the invisible line between freedom and captivity. The street signs, the corner store, the people who passed by, all froze in time, unaware that something unthinkable had just happened in plain sight. The city didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in Cleveland's history. And as the clock struck midnight and Amanda's 17th birthday began, her family waited for a daughter who would not walk through the door. Seymour Avenue, just another quiet block in Cleveland's Tremont neighborhood. Rows of modest houses, kids on bikes, neighbors who waved in passing. It was the kind of place people believed was safe because they needed to. The kind of street where you knew who lived next door, or at least thought you did. At 2207 Seymour Avenue stood a simple two-story house. Faded white paint, a sagging porch, nothing about it drew attention. But behind its walls, for over a decade, 3 missing women were held captive. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. All taken from the same small area, all vanished within walking distance of one another. What makes this story so haunting isn't just what happened inside that house, it's where it happened. Less than 4 miles separated Michelle's disappearance in 2002 from Amanda's in 2003 and Gina's in 2004. A triangle of abduction so tight it could fit on a neighborhood map. And yet no one saw the pattern. No one connected the dots. This was a community that had searched, prayed, and grieved, all while unknowingly passing by the very place that held the answers. Neighbors remembered seeing Amanda's photo on missing posters tacked to telephone poles, never realizing she was just a few doors away. Some had even spoken to the man who lived there. Polite, helpful, even charming in his own quiet way, the kind of person people trusted to fix a car or share a drink with on a summer evening. That's the disturbing truth about proximity. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it lives right in the middle of everything ordinary. And the human mind, desperate to believe in safety, overlooks what doesn't fit. People heard noises from the house, pounding, screams, music blaring late at night, and brushed it off as arguments, parties, or the chaos of city life. Nobody wanted to imagine the alternative. For years, the house at 2207 Seymour Avenue stood there, surrounded by everyday life. Mail delivered to the front porch, children walking past it to school, barbecues happening just a few feet away. It was a prison disguised as a home, hidden not by isolation, but by normalcy. The tragedy of Seymour Avenue isn't only what one man did, it's what everyone else couldn't see or couldn't believe. And as the years passed, the question grew louder. How could something so monstrous hide in plain sight for so long? In the first few days after Amanda vanished, Cleveland became a city holding its breath. Her photo was everywhere, stapled to telephone poles, taped to store windows, printed on the front of milk cartons. The same face, the same hopeful eyes, staring back at a world that seemed to keep moving while her family's life stood still. Every night, her mother, Luana, sat by the phone waiting for a call that never came.
She would drive the same streets over and over, scanning crowds, checking alleyways, calling Amanda's name as if somehow she'd answer back. Police searched the neighborhoods, volunteers joined in, but as the weeks turned into months, hope began to stretch thin. Still, her family refused to let her become another forgotten name. Every year on Amanda's birthday, her mother lit a candle in the window, a small flame burning against the dark. On the anniversary of her disappearance, they gathered in the same place, repeating her name for the cameras, pleading with anyone who might know something. But the city had seen too many missing faces, and slowly, one by one, reporters stopped calling. The years rolled by, and life outside moved forward. New buildings, new faces, changing seasons. But for Amanda's loved ones, time was frozen. Her bedroom stayed untouched, a museum of 16. Photos on the wall, notes from friends, the kind of teenage laughter that once filled the space replaced by silence. Luana held on with a strength that broke her heart a little more each year. She believed Amanda was alive. She said she could feel it. That bond between mother and daughter never faded, even when others quietly began to lose faith. And when Luana passed away in 2006, she never got the closure she'd fought for. But somewhere out there, Amanda was still alive, living a nightmare no one could imagine, while her family carried the weight of not knowing. A decade of searching, waiting, and praying, all for a girl the world thought was gone. And then, one ordinary day, that impossible phone call would finally come.
Behind the doors of 2207 Seymour Avenue, time no longer moved the way it did outside. Days melted into each other. Seasons changed only through the faint light that slipped through a boarded window or the muffled sound of fireworks on the 4th of July. Inside, 3 young women learned to exist in a world stripped of choice, freedom, and sunlight. Every inch of that house was a reminder of control. Windows sealed, doors locked from the outside. Chains, sometimes not just physical, but emotional, built from fear, from manipulation, from the constant reminder that no one was coming. The man who held them knew how to break a person without leaving marks that showed. Silence became survival. Compliance became currency. For Amanda, every morning began the same way. Uncertainty. Would it be a day of threats or a day of uneasy calm? She learned to adapt, to endure, to stay alive by reading his moods. Michelle and Gina were nearby, yet separated by locked doors and the thick silence of hopelessness. But through small, quiet acts, tapping on walls, whispered encouragements, a look that said, "Hold on," they managed to keep each other from disappearing completely. And then, life took a turn, even more unimaginable. Amanda found out she was pregnant. In a place where hope seemed forbidden, her body carried a new heartbeat. She was terrified, but that fear came with purpose. That child would be her reason to fight, her reason to wake up each day and endure what came next. When she gave birth, there was no hospital, no doctors, no family waiting to celebrate. Just dim light, fear, and the sheer will to survive. That child was born into captivity, but for Amanda, she was light in the dark. She called her Jocelyn. And somehow, despite the cruelty surrounding them, that tiny girl brought life into a place meant only for suffering. Amanda taught her daughter everything she could from memory. The alphabet, songs, the idea of the outside world. She kept her spirit alive by creating small moments of normalcy. Birthdays marked with makeshift cakes, stories whispered in the dark, laughter that didn't belong in a prison but bloomed there anyway. Years passed and Amanda carried the weight of 2 lives on her shoulders, her own and her daughter's. Through hunger, fear, and constant control, she refused to give up. Every act of care, every whispered lullaby, was a quiet rebellion against the man who tried to erase them. And though the walls never changed, something inside her did.
Beneath the fear, a spark of defiance began to grow, the belief that somehow, someday, they might walk out of that house alive. That spark would soon ignite a moment the world would never forget. After years of silence, everything changed in a single heartbeat. It was an ordinary day. Sunlight spilling through the cracks, faint noise from the street outside. But inside that house, something felt different. The man who ruled their lives was gone for longer than usual. For the first time in over a decade, Amanda sensed a sliver of opportunity. Fragile, dangerous, but real. Her heart pounded as she stepped toward the front door, the same door that had always meant punishment if touched. But when she tried it, the impossible happened. Part of it gave way. A small opening, a breath of outside air. Her hands shook as she pushed harder, splintering the doorframe. She could see daylight, actual daylight, and the sound of people talking in the distance. Freedom was right there, just beyond that narrow gap. Amanda screamed for help, the kind of scream that came from years of buried terror and unspoken prayers. A neighbor, Charles Ramsey, heard it, a noise so desperate it didn't sound human at first. He rushed toward the house, and together they tore at the door until Amanda forced her way out, clutching her little girl. On trembling legs, she ran. The air felt different, colder, sharper, real. She reached Ramsey's phone, her voice breaking as she called 911. The words that followed were raw, unfiltered, trembling with disbelief. "Help me. I'm Amanda Berry. I've been missing for 10 years. The dispatcher paused. For a moment, even the system didn't seem ready to process what it was hearing. But then the machinery of rescue snapped to life. Sirens cut through the quiet Cleveland afternoon, drawing closer and closer to the house that had kept its secret for too long. Neighbors poured into the street, stunned, whispering her name like a ghost come back to life. Inside, officers stormed through the rooms and found 2 more women, Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus, alive. After years of darkness, that house finally opened its doors to the world. And what stepped out wasn't just survival. It was defiance. It was proof that even in the deepest kind of captivity, the will to live can't be broken. But as Amanda and the others stepped into freedom, another story was just beginning, one the world would soon learn piece by piece. The man who had hidden his crimes behind ordinary walls was finally unmasked. Within hours of the women's rescue, Ariel Castro was led out of his home in handcuffs, silent, unshaven, and expressionless. The same house that had once been his fortress was now surrounded by flashing lights, police tape, and a neighborhood in disbelief. For 10 years, he had lived among them, smiling at neighbors, attending family barbecues, playing music at local events. But now, the truth stood in daylight, and every detail felt impossible to comprehend. Prosecutors moved fast. The charges were staggering. Hundreds of counts, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder, related to a pregnancy he ended by force. Each charge carried a weight that reflected not just the acts themselves, but the years of silence he had imposed on others. There would be no long, drawn-out trial. Castro accepted a plea deal, one that guaranteed he would never see freedom again. Life in prison plus 1,000 additional years. The sentence was designed to erase any chance of appeal, any hope of redemption. In court, he spoke briefly, trying to justify, minimize, and twist the story. But the law didn't bend for him. The survivors had already shown what true strength looked like, enduring what he could never have survived himself. When the gavel came down, it wasn't just a legal verdict. It was the final collapse of his illusion of control. But justice on paper can never mirror the real damage done. No sentence, no number of years could return the time stolen or the innocence lost. For the survivors, freedom was only the beginning of a different kind of battle, to heal, to trust, to live beyond what had been done to them. Only 1 month after his sentencing, Ariel Castro was found dead in his prison cell. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. In the end, the man who built a prison for others couldn't survive his own. But even as his story ended there, the women he tried to erase were just beginning to rebuild theirs, piece by piece, on their own terms. Freedom didn't mean the story was over. It meant learning how to live again. When the doors to that house finally opened, the world was waiting. Cameras, headlines, interviews, everyone wanted answers. But for the women who had spent years hidden away, the noise of freedom could be just as overwhelming as the silence of captivity. They had to start from zero, learning to trust, to sleep without fear, to step outside without flinching at every sound. Each survivor took a different path toward healing. Michelle Knight, who now goes by Lily Rose Lee, turned her pain into purpose. She spoke openly about survival, about choosing forgiveness not for him, but for herself. She became an author, an advocate, and a symbol of resilience for others who had been silenced. Amanda Berry focused on rebuilding her life privately while still using her voice to help find the missing. She took a job with a local TV station, highlighting new missing persons cases, making sure that no family would ever feel as invisible as hers once did. Gina DeJesus founded a nonprofit with her cousin, dedicated to helping families of the missing navigate the chaos of waiting, the very same waiting she once endured. Their strength transformed the narrative from tragedy to empowerment. They refused to let one man define the rest of their lives. Slowly, they reclaimed their identities piece by piece. Some days were hopeful, others unbearably heavy, but they kept moving, not to erase the past, but to build a future that could hold it without breaking. The community around Seymour Avenue changed too. The House of Horrors was torn down, replaced by open grass, a small space of peace where fear once lived. But the memory of what happened there reshaped an entire city's awareness. It changed how people looked at missing persons cases, how neighbors paid attention, how hope was held on to. Today, these women live with quiet strength. They've shown the world that survival isn't just about escaping, it's about finding meaning in what comes after. They are mothers, advocates, storytellers, and most importantly, survivors who remind us that even in the darkest places, the will to live can outlast anything. And though the house on Seymour Avenue is gone, the story it left behind still stands, as both a warning and a testament to the power of human endurance.
For more than a decade, unimaginable suffering existed behind a door that looked no different from anyone else's. A door neighbors walked past, a house that blended in, a street that seemed ordinary. It's a haunting reminder of how evil can hide in plain sight, not in the shadows of faraway places, but right next to us. The Cleveland case forces us to face an uncomfortable truth. How much do we really notice? How often do we dismiss the strange sound, the uneasy feeling, the story that doesn't quite add up? It's easier to believe everything is fine, to convince ourselves it's none of our business. But silence and comfort can sometimes become accomplices. These women survived because in one brief moment, someone listened. A neighbor cared enough to act. That decision, that single choice to pay attention, changed everything. It's proof that awareness isn't small. It saves lives. Today, their story stands as both warning and inspiration. Warning because monsters don't always look like monsters. Inspiration because survival is possible, even in the darkest conditions. And beyond the headlines, beyond the courtroom, lies a question that still echoes. Would you have noticed? Would you have acted? If you've watched this far, let it mean something. Stay alert. Trust your instincts. Support the families still searching and the organizations working every day to bring missing people home. And if you want to see more stories told with truth, care, and respect for survivors, subscribe, share, and stand with those whose voices deserve to be heard. Because stories like this shouldn't just be remembered, they should change how we see the world around us.